Mr. Simmons, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you. And my first question to you is following. What is your position regarding the Russian missile attacks on Odessa? And Russia left and broken the grain deal. And what is your position about the current developments?
Well, so first of all, of course, it's shocking to see Odessa being targeted, just as it's shocking to see all urban centres in Ukraine being targeted. It's upsetting for anyone who knows the city. It's a beautiful place, of course, and it's criminal to be targeting civilians. So, like everything else in the way that Russia is hitting Ukraine, it adds to the list of crimes, if you like. As for the grain deal, it seems pretty clear that Russia, having taken the decision that they no longer wanted to be a part of it, also appear to want to impede any ability for Ukraine to export by other means. And that too, of course, is a crime, and one that is not just about Ukraine, but hits global food security in an increasingly serious way. So we've reacted by condemning that and calling for Russia to return to the grain deal, and that's what's got to happen. But ultimately, of course, we all know what needs to happen in order for Ukraine to return to its place as a net provider and contributor to food security, which is for Russia to leave Ukraine's territory.
And what is the current British strategy about the Black Sea region?
Well, I mean, it's the same as it ever was, right? It's an important part of Ukraine's territory. It's strategically important, of course, for the reasons we've just discussed. The UK is a naval country, and before the war, and indeed, of course, during this invasion, we have long been talking with Ukrainians about increasing naval capacity, and we've continued to engage in that. So I continue to see that as part of our bilateral relationship now and in the future. So in that sense, nothing changes, actually.
And what is the position about the Russian abduction of Ukrainian children? And it's a big threat to us. And how can we, with British support, to bring these children back to Ukraine?
So, you know, I find that emotionally quite a difficult thing to talk about, because we all know that Russia is waging a hybrid invasion against Ukraine. That's why, you know, impeding the export of grain, that's part of the war, that's part of the invasion. It's not just about bombing cities. Stealing children is also part of the invasion. And it hurts, actually, to talk about it in that way, because, you know, these are people's kids. And I actually can barely stand the thought that children are taken away either forcibly or under the, you know, pretense that they're going to summer camps, or that they're going somewhere for their health, or even if they are going to summer camps or for their health, it's both made bureaucratically difficult for families to bring them back, or they are subject to an extraordinary, relentless range of brainwashing that, frankly, actually Ukraine, I know, has seen over the years, because this issue of taking children away is not a new thing. Creates a psychological barrier between the kids and their parents. We know that there are children who come back from some of those engagements thinking that, you know, fighting Ukraine is the right thing to do, and so Ukraine inherits not just one but two issues here. One is the need, of course, to return those children to their families, but the other is the psychological journey to undo the harm of that brainwashing. All of it adds up to a story which is utterly horrendous. It's horrendous on every conceivable level. And for me, it's an issue that it's not even one that requires much discussion. Stop stealing Ukraine's children. Allow those children to return. Allow parents to be able to reclaim their children, and allow Ukraine to grow. But it's pretty clear that if you steal children from the country, you are doing it to cut off at the knees the idea that there is a viable next generation that will defend the country. It's appalling on every level.
Last month it was the Ukraine conference in London, and how do you see the role of Britain in the Ukrainian recovery?
So I was at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, and I thought it was fantastic. And when you're part of supporting a country that's engaged in an existential fight, I think it's important to have a healthy skepticism about conferences. You want to be really clear that if people are going to come together, they're coming together for a reason that's really going to help a country that needs proper help. But I believe that the Ukraine Recovery Conference actually did do that. And the reason why I think that is because at that conference, what the UK managed to do was to broker relationships between businesses interested in investing in and supporting Ukraine for the first time, actually, and the Ukrainian government. And I know that Ukrainian government ministers who were there really valued the opportunity to make their pitch and present their plans to those businesses. So I'm very proud, actually, that we were able to do that the UK could be the facilitator of that. And since you have the stock exchange and you have the city there, it's a natural broker relationship that I think we found for ourselves. So I'm keen now that the conference is done, on the one hand, of course, the expectation and pressure is there for Ukrainian government ministers to translate those introductions into memorandum of understanding and projects and new relationships. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to mature that relationship as an introducer and a facilitator, and a picture that I'm quite keen myself that the UK takes forward in the future.
Great, and let's talk about the military support of Ukraine from Great Britain, and why is Operation Interflex is crucial for strengthening the armed forces of Ukraine and military support of Britain in general?
Well, so I think that's two questions. So on the military training, again, that's another thing to be really proud of, right? Firstly, because you have over 20,000 troops who have got their basic battle engagement training in, and the majority of those have not had that kind of experience ever before. So the difference between sending people in who are basic combat ready and sending people in who aren't, that can be a fundamental thing on which the morale of troops and their ability to engage can turn. So that that basic training has been, and I've been to a couple of those bases, incredibly important for just helping mobilise troops to have a sense of readiness. Not just they've got basic kit, but also they feel psychologically ready with an understanding, and they can engage with their basic weaponry, and they know what to do in the field, and most crucially, they know how to administer first aid in battle situations. So, and we can see that it's effective because we know now that there are 6 or 7 other countries that have contributed trainers to those locations. So we know that other countries also see that that basic battle preparedness is a very important thing for the Ukrainian armed forces. So that's great. As for the military engagement, the provision of kit, the Prime Minister has said, and so has the Foreign Secretary, that we'll support Ukraine for however long it takes. That includes, of course, being able to make available what we have that the Ukrainians say is useful to them. And if we don't have it, continuing to engage in the conversations with others who are involved in military support to see if they can.
Ambassador Simmons, how is it to work in the country of your ancestors?
It's complicated. That's how it is. Because, you know, I've been here 4 years. I'm coming almost to the end of my 4-year tour. And on the one hand, it's been quite a journey for me to understand, you know, a place with such a close relationship to my mother's side of the family. Things that we didn't know about the country, that just because I've been here, I've been able to share for my mother, and which she and her relatives have found very precious, because it's been, you know, well over 100 years, like 120 years since we had family here. The bit that's more complex is that although my great-great-grandparents left and established themselves safely in the UK and the US, they were running from something. They didn't leave because they wanted a better life somewhere else. They left because it was dangerous to stay. And I think that that remains an unresolved part of Ukraine's history, why it was that people who are not rich, I don't come from a rich family, nonetheless thought that it was so dangerous to be a Jew in Ukraine that they had to leave. And then history proved that their fears were right, not just through pogroms, but also through the Holocaust. That's a story that remains to be understood, I think, and to be shared. And I notice that when I do interviews and people ask me this question, because there is a real love of the idea that I have a personal connection, everyone is very interested in the emotional part of that history, but there is not much interest in what lay behind the decision to leave.